Okay, looks good. Cooperative Legacy Project interview number 71, March 31st, 2007. We're visiting with Jack and Edna Smith. Jack is former manager of the Farmers Union Oil Company at Union Center. And Edna, you were the former bookkeeper.
Yes.
Where, I'm going to ask each of you this question. Jack, we'll go with you first. Where and when were you born?
Born in Presho, South Dakota in August 4th, 1925.
Okay. And Edna?
I was born in our little ranch house out at Hereford, South Dakota on February 27th, 1932.
Okay. And do either you have brothers and sisters? You got families, Jack?
I have 7 brothers and sisters.
Big families.
I got four brothers and there's 5 boys and 3 girls in our family.
And where did they all end up at?
Well, Rob is my brother. Run this here after I left, and one lives by faith, and one lives by Opal on a ranch, and one lives on the home place. He sold it to his son. And I got a sister who lives in Oregon. I got a sister she's married to a pastor, Harold Delbridge, up here at Red Owl.
Nyla in Rapid.
And you got a sister in Rapid, yeah.
And how about you? Big family too?
Yes, we had 8 in our family. My oldest brother, Francis Haley, was an auctioneer for 52 years. He's now deceased. And then I had a sister in Washington. She is deceased the same year.
D.C. or state?
Washington State.
Where at out there?
They lived at Puyallup for many years, and then they moved to Anderson Island.
Oh, okay.
And then I had a sister that lived in Rapid City most of her life. And she deceased the same year, the same year we moved back to Union Center, 2000. And I have a brother that lives in California, Bob, and a brother, Richard, that lives at Puyallup, Washington. And my only sister that's left is in Rapid City, South Dakota, Dorothy. And then I had a sister, Belva, that lived in Belle Fourche, and she died the same year that my sister Mary did.
Okay. Where was your family originally from, Jack?
Well,
they ended up in
my mother was born at Avon, South Dakota, and I think that's where my dad was born, in Avon, South Dakota. And my dad got asthma so bad down there, and then we moved out here to Hereford. And he kind of got over his asthma.
Where had they been from before they moved to South Dakota? Before they got
Avon.
And before that, though?
That's all where they came from.
Oh, okay.
Avon. Yeah.
Okay, but Smith sounds like it might be English, actually.
Well, my granddad, his dad came from Ireland.
Ireland, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Edna, where was your family from?
Well, my ancestors came from Ireland and from Germany.
Okay.
And so I'm more Irish than I am German. But
what was your last name?
Haley was my maiden
name. Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
And they were ancestors from Ireland. They were full-blooded Irish. And my mother's side of the family came from Germany originally.
Okay.
And then she, later on, as a little girl, 9 years old, moved to the Hereford community. And my dad's family moved to Hereford just a little bit before that, in the early 1900s.
Okay. My mother's family came from Russia.
Oh, okay.
It was German Russian.
German Russian.
Yeah, my mother's side of the family, her father and mother, neither one could talk English. But all the kids could talk English, of course.
Yeah.
So when Jack and I were growing up, people didn't go very much back and forth in those days. We only lived about 12 miles apart. but we didn't get together until later in life.
Yeah. Always like to talk a little bit about the parents. Jack, what was your dad's name?
What was my dad's name?
Yeah.
Perry Smith.
Perry. Okay. And you want to talk about him a little bit? What sort of a person was he?
Well, he was
Get your hands up.
he was a workaholic. That's what he was. He farmed for years. He trucked. He done a little bit of everything. And in the 30s, he had to work on WPA and to keep his family, but he died when he was young, only 64 years old. But he accumulated 10,000 acres of land before, well, of course, us boys helped, but he accumulated that much land. Of course, my mother helped too. She raised turkeys and chickens. But he put us in our place, I'll tell you that. He learned us how to work.
Yeah. What was your mother's name?
Amanda. Her maiden name was Amanda Sattler.
You want to talk about her a little bit?
Well, my mother was an awful hard worker and raised all those kids and probably never had too many conveniences, but over the years, well, she raised turkeys and bought like wash machine and a refrigerator and stuff like that. But when she was only, I think, 40 years old, she got MS. And she died when she was 56 years old.
Yeah.
My dad died when he was 64. So, but that, I don't know, that was, when the 30s was, it was pretty tough making a living for all them kids, you know.
Yeah. How about your father? What was his name?
My father's name was Williams Haley, but everybody called him Slivers. He had a nickname.
Slivers. How did he get a nickname like that?
They sent him outside to get some kindling to start the fire the next morning, and he just came in with little tiny pieces of wood. So they named him Slivers, and that stuck with him for life.
Okay.
He was a hard worker. He ran the road grader for many years out in the Hereford community. And then after we moved to town in 1944, he got a job at Fort Meade. And that was a time when the prisoners were there, the prisoners of war. So he worked for a while as a guard. And then after he got through with after they moved the prisoners away, he got a job as boiler fireman. He loved music, and my mother did too. So they used to go by horse and wagon and play for dances down at a place that would be a little bit north and mostly east of Hereford, South Dakota. They had quite a trek to make in their wagon and the horses, and they'd play all night, and then when it got light and they could go home the next day, they'd go home with a horse and buggy or horse and wagon. Yeah.
Okay.
And my mother was a hard-working lady too, and she never had any conveniences. We didn't even have a well on our farm, so we had to haul water from my grandma Haley's, which was about 3 miles away. And before I was born, my mother said she used to take the horse and put a 5-gallon cream can on each side of the horse and ride down to Grandma Haley's and get the water. And you can imagine about how long 10 gallons would last.
Yeah.
We never had electricity on our farm there, even though it had come through the country. And what year did the electricity come?
Before I went to the Army.
So it was
About
late 40s, probably.
50, probably 1950. My folks moved from Avon out here in 1929.
Okay. Was that as a result of the the farm situation back there at that?
No, that's when my dad got that asthma so
Oh,
bad.
yeah, okay, yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
But he come out here and he was all right.
My folks did have a farm. They had about 800 acres, but my dad wasn't a real good farmer, and he never had any machinery that was very good to farm with. So basically, the living came from his road job, grading roads.
Yeah. You both had some memories in the 1930s? Conditions out
I
there?
have plenty of them. Yes, I remember when the grasshoppers would eat the post until they looked like they was new, eat the paint off in the house, and you didn't dare leave a coat laying around or they eat that up. And just as dry. I know my dad put in a crop in the spring of '36 and it never came up, never even came up. And then in the fall, when we got a terrible hailstorm, and water was running right on the level, about probably 4 inches deep. And that's the year then we moved from where we lived there to where we was raised in that home place. And my brother bought it, and then he sold it to his son now. He's retired.
I don't remember much about the 30s because I was born in 32, but most of it was just what my folks had said about the 30s.
Yeah, they talked about it a lot.
Oh, yeah, because those were really tough days.
Yeah.
At that time, my dad was grading the roads with horses in an old road grader pulled by horses.
Yeah, in 1939, we got a little bit of a crop. And my dad went and bought a truck, the second truck he had. And people was moving out. He moved his dad and his brother down to Presho. He'd done a lot of trucking after that, and that's when he used to buy calves, and we'd raise them. That's how he got started. I know in 1936 we had, I think, 11 milk cows, or 12, and about 8 head of horses, and that's everything he owned, besides a batch of kids. Yeah.
Were there a lot of population loss out here? I've read where there were a lot of homesteaders out here that just couldn't make it through those years and left.
I don't know how many acres the homesteads were. Were they 40 acres, Jack?
Generally 160.
Were they 160?
Yeah.
And then I think in order to claim up on them, you had to live there for so many years.
Yeah, you can get more land if you planted trees.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that happened out here, but
Trees, they wouldn't grow out here.
yeah.
They did. The grasshoppers ate them up.
Most of the claim shacks are gone now that were back then, because people accumulated a lot of acres and bought up the other land. But I know my folks, that's what their house was an old schoolhouse with a claim shack butted up against it. It's still standing on the way to Sturgis. When you get to the Hereford turnoff, you'll see a house off to the south. That's where I was born and raised.
Okay. Obviously, from what you've been saying, life out here was quite a bit different then than it is today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, it was.
You know, in the 30s, I can remember the dirt would blow every day, and if there was a little weed there, the dirt would pile up there a foot high, you know. I know we had woven wire fences, and they would just pile plumb over the top of them, and it was a mess.
Was there a lot of farming going on here at that time? Had a lot of the land been broken up, or was this pasture even blowing?
Yeah, pasture was even blowing. Well, yeah, they broke up some land since then, but they did quite a little farming. Of course, they used horses mostly, you know, then.
Sure. Did you both go to country schools? Which one did you go to, Jack?
I went to Doyle. Well, I went to Lodge School until I was in the 6th grade. And then I went to Doyle School to the 8th grade. Never went to high school. They had a high school out there in the country. And me and my brother started and went till Christmas. And they closed it and never opened again. I don't know whether we closed it or what happened, but they moved it someplace else and used it for the lower grades.
Mm-hmm.
But my brother, he went on. I stayed home, and my brother next to me went. I was the oldest one in the family. He went on to high school and graduated. And I had just one other brother that graduated. And all my sisters, 3 sisters, they graduated from New Underwood.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
I went to the country school. It was called the Clover School, but for some reason, probably because it was so close to the Haley household, they called it the Haley School most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the same district that the schools were that Jack went to.
Well, you had big families. You were almost populating the schools.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I went to that school until I was in the 7th, through the 7th grade. We moved to town in 44, and I started the 8th grade in Sturgis.
Yeah.
And went to high school there and college in Spearfish.
Mm-hmm. Now that was even in those early years that was a common thing for kids to go into like Sturgis to go to high school.
That's where you had to go either Sturgis or New Underwood.
Yeah. Did you do
to
board with somebody in there or? How did
well,
that work?
my folks moved in
Yeah.
44, so I was one of the lucky ones. Our schoolhouse where I went to high school was just across the street from where we lived.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have far to go.
Yeah.
And went all through high school there.
Okay.
But most of the people, even today, they have to board their kids out.
Yeah, I've done interviews with Richard.
Yeah, like Underwood, they had a dormitory there.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the kids stayed.
Mm-hmm.
But before we moved into town, my other family members, Frances didn't get to complete high school, but Mary and Alice both had to board out in Sturgis and work their way through school. And then, consequently, they didn't even come home in the summertime because they needed to work to pay the tuition for the next year. Mm-hmm. So by the time that they left home to go to high school, they pretty much didn't live at home after that.
Yeah.
And that was, my sister Alice was only 12 years old when she finished 8th grade. So from the age of 12 on, she worked her way through.
There's not a lot of areas in South Dakota like this where people had to send their kids to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you don't know what the kids are doing, like you're...
And sometimes kids are a little homesick when they're taken away from home. Back in those days, they didn't get out as much as they do today.
No.
Yeah. So you were both from big families. What did you want to do when you were young? Did you have ambitions to ranch or farm or?
When I was 5 years old, I started school. They allowed that as long as a teacher was agreeable to take me that age. And all I wanted to ever do was teach school. So I taught school for 33 years.
Okay. Country school, so?
Country school for 6 years, and then when we moved to Minnesota, I taught in a Christian school, but it was in a country setting. It was an old country schoolhouse that we added on to.
Okay, where was that at then?
That was down in Minnesota at Foreston, Minnesota.
Where's that near?
That would be about 25 miles from St. Cloud.
Oh, okay.
East of St. Cloud.
Okay. Quite a bit different country than out here.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to be a farmer and a rancher. I never did care for school.
Yeah.
I stayed out every chance I got. My dad kept me out quite a little, too, because I was the oldest one in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And when we moved back here in 2000, I went up to the superintendent's office and told him that I would like to be a substitute out here. So I was substituting out here for the first 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But now I'm getting too old and cranky.
You don't seem very cranky to me. Let's see. I've kind of. Sometimes we answer some of the more than one question at a time, and I have to scan my questions here to see where I want to go from. So where did you all meet?
I met her when she was about 15 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He became close friends with my brother Richard, and
Yeah.
used to come up to the house
Mm-hmm.
as a friend of the family. And we had seen each other probably a couple of times over the years when we both lived so close together, but never really became acquainted until later on.
And when did you get married then?
We got married 50 years ago, June 1st.
Okay.
So it was June 1st, 1957.
All right.
Right here at Union Center in the little country church
Oh,
over
okay.
here.
Yeah. I was a bashing and a farming in the Hereford country at that time. I had cattle and took a bunch of sheep on shares. And then we dried out and hailed out in 59, wasn't that 59, I think? And so we sold out, and she taught school, and I worked in Rapid City for all that winter. And then one winter, we bought a trailer house, and we moved to Spearfish, and she went to school, and I worked in Rapid City, and then I worked here for a while at Union Center for Jack Bergman.
He was the first manager.
Yeah, he was first manager. Yeah, he was a great guy to start a farmers union up, but about 5 years is all he could take, you know. He started getting cranky with the people, and
I think he started the one at Gregory, too.
yeah,
Oh,
he did.
okay.
And then at Minnesota, I can't think of that place down there. He started up several, and we was farming down in Kennebec, South Dakota, and Edna was teaching school down there, and they kept coming down there wanting me to run this place. That was in 1963, and I had no education. I didn't think I could run it, and I finally said, "Well, if my wife can be my bookkeeper, I'll take it." And they didn't think that would work, but they finally agreed, so that we started out. And it was a bad one, I'll tell you that. We was on COD. The board never said a word to me about it. On COD, and a $40,000 feed bill they owed. That big Quonset wasn't paid for, not a dime paid on it. And of course, when we took over, all the guys come and wanted their money, of course. But I don't know how come they didn't say a thing to us, because we was green and dumb, you know. They didn't know anything, but we made her go over.
What was your perspective on that? You were keeping the books.
Yeah, I was keeping the books. And
Well, I had to take it on commission.
Yeah.
Had to buy all the trucks, and we took it on commission until I think 1969. We bought the other station up there, and Edna and I made the down payment on that station until the Farmers Union could get money enough to pay me back, you know, and we made payments on it. But when we left here, it was doing good. This here was about paid for, and that there, and we was making payments on it.
the reason that we made the down payment, the bank wouldn't loan any money to the co-op,
No,
but they would loan money to us personally.
we didn't have that much security then, you know.
Well, I really loved keeping books over there. It was really wonderful, but it was a lot different than it is today, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, when we come here, we bought 4 trucks, didn't we? Mm-hmm. 4 trucks, yeah. And then when we bought Sturgis, I had to buy 2 more for there. Mm-hmm. And we hired my brother in 1964.
Yeah, I think so.
And his brother-in-law we hired in 65 or 4.
I think we hired Wayne in 63 in December, and Rob in March of 64, and they're still here, most of them.
Yeah, and they're still here. We kept them in our house until they got married, and then they each got a trailer house and lived here. Then we hired a bookkeeper. I don't know what year we hired her, and she's still here, Viola. What year did we hire her?
She'd have to tell you. I think she's been here 38 or 9 years.
And then I hired another guy in 1971, and he's still here, Lynn Tarrant. He's still here, and Rob and Wayne is still here.
I think that must almost be a record for co-ops to have 4 employees stay that long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jack was a good judge of character.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they come out here and they tell me, you hire them guys that's out of college. And I said, I don't want to hire anybody that's smarter than me. I said, I want to hire a farmer, and I know they can work. Mm-hmm. And it would really make them mad.
Did you have a little bit more turnover once you bought the old station over in Sturgis?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, oh, yeah. In Sturgis, we had a turnover all the time.
It was a headache.
Because
out here, those employees would come and stay. But in Sturgis, Jack would hire somebody, and sometimes I wouldn't even have a chance to get their Social Security number written down, and they were already gone. Mm-hmm. They wanted big wages and lots of time off. But basically, the 2 best workers that we had up there, as far as the men were concerned, were both older fellas that had been farmers.
Yeah, old farmers.
And they'd both been struck by lightning even.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both struck by lightning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One 3 times.
Yeah, one of them had been struck by lightning 3 times.
Yeah.
Gunnar Nelson. And Kennard Hart had been struck once and really bad.
Yeah.
Well, we started here, we just had 1 other employee besides the 2 of us. And then we just kept increasing until when we left, I think we had 23 full-time employees counting us.
Well, this here was, you ought to have seen the building we had over here. Just a little old Quonset. It was 60 foot long.
Mm-hmm. I remember stopping there.
Yeah, and it was nothing. No air conditioner, and little old, about half as big as this kitchen for where the bookkeepers was.
Yep. Not very warm in the wintertime is what the Bible
Well, that the back part never even had a stove when I come here.
Yeah.
They had to work in the coal. Well, I put a stove in after I got here.
I've heard you had kind of a storage area upstairs, and there was kind of like mice up there.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was very compact.
Mm-hmm.
But this is quite a building here.
Yes. This was quite a bit after you left.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was built, in the 90s sometime, wasn't it? Or?
Yeah, I think it was in the 90s. I don't remember exactly when, but yeah.
And you, of course, have a new facility down in Sturgis, or over in Sturgis now, too.
The tanks, bulk tanks used to sit right there where that building is.
Okay. Yep.
And before we left, I knew we was going to have to move them tanks. So we went and bought some more land, but they moved them after we left. But we bought some more land down there, and that's where they moved them.
Yeah.
See, when we bought land here twice, the land, it didn't go very far down here. And then we bought land and built that next building down there. And then of course, the missile base come in and put a big sewer down there. So the guy that owns the land there, Floyd Strong, he let us hook into that. Of course, we had to pay him, but we hooked into that. Otherwise, we was having sewer trouble all the time because it was just running into the ground, you know. They put a bunch of cars down there and then run it in there. But they ain't had any problems since they put it down there. It's the sewer system down there was big enough for a town, you know. They made it that big.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jack had been manager here for about 7 years when they decided, and it was the field man that really put the bug in the ear of the board of directors that Jack had to go to manager school.
Mm.
So he went down to St. Paul to manager school. He was down there for 3 weeks. And they told him down there at manager school that he was supposed to sit behind a desk and just tell the employees what to do. He was not supposed to get in a truck and deliver anything. He wasn't supposed to fix a tire. He wasn't supposed to do anything but just manage. And he said, well, that isn't ever going to work. I'm not going to be a manager if that's the way it goes. Because he was working right beside the employees all the time.
Well, when a stranger come here, they didn't know who the manager was because I was out there with the guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they said, well, how much money at Groth are you going to do this year? I said, we're going to beat $1 million. He said, you'll never make it. You ain't got education enough to make it. And Tom Steichen was there, and he said, you send the what do you call
Audit
it?
report.
Audit report down. He said, you send the audit report down, and I'll show these guys. Because we've been really going. And this here one, Dean Rasmussen, you can ask him. He said, we sold enough fencing here to go clear across South Dakota a couple times. Yeah. At one time when I was down there, we was ordering our stuff. We went to showcase is what they called it, and then you ordered your stuff. And one time we went down there, and I said I wanted 50,000 posts. And this guy said to Dean Rasmussen, did he say 5,000? No, Dean said he said 50,000.
Okay. So, what was your relationship with the board members around here? Was it Richard Harwood was on the board then? His dad was on the board.
Yeah, his dad, and Olin Mooney, Olin Matkins, and
Wendell Fee.
Lawrence Bozick, and Harwood, Andy Harwood.
And Ingalls. Was Ingalls on then?
No, not that
Not
time.
first.
Who was the other one? Cecil Boyston.
Yeah, Cecil Boyce.
Yeah.
They were all
Oh, good.
members.
Whatever you want to do, I'd ask them. Whatever you think's the best.
There was one on there that was kind of a yes man.
Yes, he was.
He
but
didn't speak up, but Cecil Boydston was really good because he would ask about things. If he wanted to know anything, he'd come into the office and ask, and I would show him the paper, whatever it
Well,
would be.
they all was interested.
Yeah. But Cecil was one of them that would ask more questions probably about what was going on. And we had such a good relationship with our Harlan
Hanson.
Harlan Hansen. He was our auditor.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he told me one time, he said, I wish all of the co-ops would be like this one. He said, you never try to hold anything back from me. You've got the papers there to show me when I come and audit. And he said, if they were all that way, it would sure be a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't know any of the board members, but Cecil, I kind of knew him, and kind of knew Andy Harwood, but not that good. But Owen Matkins, after I was here about a year, he said, "Boy, I didn't know about you. I didn't know what you done or how you was going to be or anything." But he said, Andy said that you was all right, so that's one reason why we hired you. But I still regret them guys not telling us what was going on here. Of course, Jack, he was awful good about hiding stuff when he didn't want anybody to know, even when the auditor came. He was a good manager. There ain't no two ways about it. He was a good manager, but he'd been in the business long enough. He knew what he could get away with and what he couldn't.
Yeah, and the rules and the general arrangements with managers were quite different back then than they are today.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was tough for us, taking it on percentage. I'll tell you, you had to work and pay. Well, it got so bad then with hiring and firing and buying this trucks and all that stuff. I just couldn't keep up with it. So they bought my trucks, and I sold them my trucks. And we had a guy come and appraise them, and that's what they paid me for. I had all pretty new trucks at that time.
But that didn't happen until after we had bought the Sturgis substation.
Yeah.
But the guys down at the school too also told us that we shouldn't associate with each other. Jack shouldn't associate with any of his employees. Well, we lived over here where Rob lives now, and there were everybody else that worked for us except Viola lived here too. All had trailer houses.
Sure.
So we were just like one big happy family. We all got along really well. And how are you going to not
in a
associate?
community this size.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have big Christmas parties for the employees and everything. Do a lot of things together. Jack would take the men to the car races once a year. He'd take them fishing and so forth. And it was just like one big happy family.
It was all out of our pocket.
We all got along really well.
Yeah.
But we went out of here with about $13,000 we never did get. People owing us, we had that on commission. But we never did get it all. But that's the way that's tough, when people don't pay.
Bookkeeping was quite different back in those days than it is today when it's all computerized.
Yes. And Viola and I were just talking yesterday. They celebrated their 50th anniversary yesterday. And we went over and had a visit with them. And she was saying then, too, that it was so much better to keep track of everything because we had systems where we always had a way to prove that these figures were correct. And now it's a lot different with all this computerized stuff.
And then before, it was a couple of years or 3 years before we left, they got these check notes, You could write a check, and they was good, but when them come due, it was just like a check coming due, And then that's how we got stuck with a lot of it, too.
Because if the money wasn't in the bank in that account at that time, then Jack was responsible for it.
Yeah, I had to pay it.
So.
Well, that wasn't so good.
No.
Okay. Well, we're kind of bouncing around a little bit. You mentioned serving in the Army.
Yeah, I served 2 years.
When was that?
From 1950 to 53.
Okay.
51
Korean.
to 53, honey.
Huh?
51 to 53.
Oh, yeah.
March.
You're right. 51 to 53. I had 2 other brothers. We was all in together.
Okay.
I served from 51 to 53, and my brother next to me went in before I did, and he put in an extra year so he wouldn't have to be, what do you call it?
He didn't want to have to be in the
Reserves. I had to be in the reserves for 5 years, but he took the extra year, and then he wasn't in the reserves. But my other brother, he got out in 2 years of time,
Did you get overseas then?
No, I got as far as Alaska, as far as I ever go.
Alaska.
But my brother next to me, he spent some time there, pretty bad time, over in Korea.
Jack had a real bad leg and he had been classified 4F. every time he went down for.
That was in the Second
Yeah.
World War.
But then when the Korean conflict came along, then they drafted him.
I was farming and had stock and everything, and they still took me. In the First World War, or Second World War, they sent me down there 3 or 4 times, and they never passed on account of my legs.
Mm-hmm.
But then, with this Korean conflict, where they took me, and right away I had to have one of them operated on, and they've been bothering me ever since. They've bothered me for years.
Where were you at up in Alaska?
Anchorage and up in there. I was a branch of the Navy,
Okay.
and so we was unloading and loading ships and stuff.
Kind of wet and cold up there?
Yeah, well, we was there when it was daylight 24 hours a day,
Oh, okay.
and it wasn't bad then. But Edna and I went up there, and what year did we go up there?
52.
62, yeah, we went up to Alaska.
Yeah, 62. I mean.
Mm-hmm.
No, not 62. 82.
82, yeah.
I got the wrong date. 82. We went to Alaska. Drove up.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're kind of bouncing around here a little bit. You have kids?
We have 3.
3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had,
Family's getting smaller as
Yes.
time goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are
I-
they at now?
well, Marvin is in Florida, and Tammy's in Minnesota, and Deanne's in California.
All over the country.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Spread
they
out.
did. I guess they didn't like their parents, so they moved away.
Okay. So, had there been around here, this co-op was founded, what, about 1957?
Yeah.
58.
58.
July of 58.
Okay. So, have there been other co-ops here? Because it's my understanding that the town was named after Farmers Union.
Yeah.
They had a farmer's
It was
union.
a
I guess it
co-op.
was a creamery, actually,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Creamery.
In the old store building that still says Union Center Store on it,
Okay.
in that building.
Okay, that was originally a
Yeah.
Farmers Union Creamery?
Yeah.
Okay. Had there been a Farmers Union store at all? I know in some places there were. There was one down in Quinn. I think we still got the sign from that at the office.
There was another store someplace. Where was that?
But I don't think that there was ever a store at
Out
that
here,
point
I don't
when
think
they
so.
had the Farmers Union Creamery
I
there.
don't think there was.
Okay. Well, you spent a lot of time working in cooperatives. What do you like about co-ops? Is it, obviously, you had a community here that was pretty co-op minded, and you're all together here.
Well, what I liked about it was the fact that people owned the co-op, and they did a lot of business here, and they had a heart for what was going on here because they owned it. And of course, it helped that they were getting dividends every year. One year we paid 13.1%. I think that was the last year we were here.
You tell them about them dividends, and they, we'd never get them. But then when they get the dividend check, boy, that spruced them right up. They'd be coming back and buying then,
In visiting with people out here, it seems like for the folks right around here that having service available locally here was important for them because there was so many miles to the nearest other places.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I'll tell you, in the mornings here, a lot of times, my brother goes over there at 6 o'clock, and they're already stopping for gas or fixing a tire. I don't know what they do without it, really. They've got, they got 2 gas trucks and 2 propane trucks and a tire truck now.
When Jack was managing the co-op here too, he always kept such a supply on hand
Yeah.
that if they needed 500 posts, you had them, or if they needed bales of wire or whatever, or baling twine or whatever, that he'd have it on hand. And he had a lot of other things on hand too that they don't carry anymore.
Yeah, the hardware used to be a really big.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was into the 70s and 80s, I think, when that changed.
Probably. Because we left here in 73,
Okay.
and we still had
Yeah.
$1 million inventory between here and Sturgis. the board would get after Jack about carrying so much stuff, and he said, well, if we don't have it, we can't sell it. And if they had to go to Rapid City or Sturgis to get supplies, then after about 2 or 3 times of that, they wouldn't have come back.
Yeah. For a long time, you went out here with that old building as a station. Was there any earlier move to build something different?
Yeah, they were thinking about it then. But then when we bought the Sturgis station, well, they kind of forgot about it a little bit. But after we left, they must have started in again. Because I know we were thinking about building here at one time.
And they talked a lot about building a grain elevator here.
Yeah.
They really wanted one, a co-op grain elevator, but some of them were against it and some of them were for it. And during that time, while we were still here then, the one across the road started up, which is now Comax.
Making feed for cow cubes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there was an old guy down by Underwood. He said he'd furnish the money to set one up, but they didn't seem to want to do it. So
There was such a wide territory too, probably 100 and some miles in radius that these guys would travel delivering stuff, and sometimes when you were delivering fuel, you'd take along a lot of other things too. Even they used to call and want to know, would Jack or Wayne stop at the store over there and get them some raisins or something they needed. And so, just helping people out meant a lot, and it helped the co-op to really grow.
Yeah, that's quite different than other parts of the world where people wouldn't have thought about that, where towns were closer together and there were stores available and so.
Ed did make out the gas refund, and if their gas refund, she always wrote and told them when it was due. Some of them would call me and say, we need gas, but they really didn't need gas. But then we could take their gas refund up there to them.
Yeah, and that was just something that we did to help them out too, was make out their gas refund, send it in. They were supposed to do that themselves.
That's one way we get them to pay up, because they had to have that paid up before they could get their gas refund. I had a guy one time, he come down and he paid his gas bill and went home and called the bank and canceled the check, put a stop on the check. So the bank called me, so I just called down to Pier and I put a stop on his gas refund. And he didn't get any gas refund for several years.
So you left here in 1973. Where did you go then?
We went down to Minnesota and bought a farm down there.
Okay, well, where was this at then? You mentioned where you were teaching at.
Yeah, our town was Forreston, Minnesota.
Malacca was just as close.
Malacca was our closest town where you could buy supplies. But we were about 30 miles west of St. Cloud on the farm.
Yeah, so it's kind of an unusual thing. More often people move west than move back east and start farming east.
We knew where I was raised over there, some people lived right below the hill. And they went down there, and their son went down there. We going down there and visit them. We got to liking it, I guess.
So how long were you there?
We were there for 20 years on the farm, and another 7 years in town after we sold the farm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what was farming like over there in Minnesota?
A lot different than out here.
We
Not so much about rain, probably.
we was down there 20 years, and we only dried out once. Had to buy feed, but the rest of the time we always had plenty of hay and stuff.
Probably not quite so much hail or anything like that could happen out
Never hailed at our place except just little tiny pea-sized hails a couple of different times.
To do any damage
But no.
The old guy we bought it from, he lived there all his life. He was 87 years old, and he said never was hailed out.
Yep.
But it surely was a lot different, because in the morning you couldn't get out there like you can here in hay or bale or anything like that.
Well, till 10, 11 o'clock, it'd be just wet, you know.
Sometimes it'd be noon
Yeah.
before you could get started.
Yep.
And we did some dairying too. Jack dairied for what, 7 years maybe.
Oh, 5, 6 years.
But he had beef cattle down there, and that was something new to that country too. In our area where we lived, it was mostly all dairy.
Yeah.
So people thought we were crazy when we came in there with 100 head of cattle.
Yeah.
Well, they wanted, you know, there's a couple of times they wanted me to run a co-op down there, but I wouldn't do it. A lot of them co-ops, after we come down there, they went broke. I know of 3 of them that went broke while we was there.
It seemed like the managers were having a hard time getting along with the board members.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
But
problem.
the board members were kind of running the show. And
Yep.
you've got, if you're going to have a good manager, you're going to have to let him have some leeway as how he's going to run things.
Well,
We
you
have a
know,
new manager here now that's quite
The-
new, you know.
the board members ain't there every day. They don't know what's going on
Yeah.
and what people need, you know.
Yep. That seems to be a problem in a lot of places. I
Yeah,
interviewed with a
that's
guy
right.
who was a board member down at Winter yesterday, and he talked a bit about them having that kind of a problem there. Board members wanting to micromanage the operation there when
Yeah,
they should
well, that's
let
the problem.
manager do it.
Right. The board members need to know what's going on, and anytime they ever asked, well, we'd always show them what was going on. But Jack didn't pay a whole lot of attention to them. If they said don't do this or don't do that, he used his judgment anyway. Because you've got to know what's going on and what to do.
Yeah. Now, there was a relationship with the Farmers Union here, of course, too.
Yes.
And the organization was
Oh, yeah.
here in these parts.
The
Yeah.
exchange, of course, they went broke.
Yeah.
You know, what got me, they was always trying to tell you how to run your place out here. And here they was going broke all the time, you know.
Yeah. Was the education program running out here? I know Viola, when she started, got involved with that at Pat Harwood.
Yes. Myself, I didn't get involved with that at all. I was just too busy with the bookkeeping
Yeah.
part. But they were very active at that time.
Yes,
Viola's been such a
she still is.
person
Yeah.
to keep going with that.
Yeah.
I don't know how much longer she can
I
can
think
go
she's
with.
passed some of it off to kids now.
Yeah, and she still goes to camp with those kids and kind of roughs it. I don't know. I admire her for that. But we had such good employees here. The employees, along with the manager, you know, built the business. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
So when we came here in '63, I believe it was 231,000 net
Yeah.
that year. And when we left here 9.5 years later, it was 1,010,000. And of course we had the substation too, but
Yeah.
we out here had to be paying for the substation because they
Yeah.
weren't going on their own.
That's where it was when we left.
So it was
This
pretty
place
tough
here
years.
was paying for the
Yeah.
substation up there because it wasn't that great. But now it's doing good.
Yeah. Since then, they've also taken in a co-op up at Bell.
Oh yeah, in Rapid City.
And Hot Springs, there's
Yeah.
5
Yeah.
of them now.
Yeah, but not the C stations in Rapid City.
No, I don't
Those
think
are
so.
kind of there's a lot
Yeah.
of competition for gas sales
Yeah.
down there. Yeah. I think I was told that Cenex wanted to sell them to them, but they didn't buy.
Oh.
Or at least that's what Richard said.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of continuity in the people involved in the co-op out here too, more so maybe than there are in some areas. I know in the Harwood family there are 3 generations on the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that it's been difficult for the Farmers Union or any organization to keep on going like it did in those days.
Yeah.
People have too many things to go to nowadays.
Yes.
They get themselves spread too thin, and a good share of the farm women out here, ranch women, are working
Yeah,
out.
that wasn't true back then.
No.
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 You know, that's true all over the state.
Yeah.
Let's see here. You what caused you to decide to move back out here after you'd been in Minnesota for 27 years?
Well, our family mostly.
Yeah.
Her family was here, most of them, and all mine but one is here.
Mm-hmm.
When we moved back, all 8 of
Yeah.
us kids were still living.
Yeah.
All 8 of his are still living.
Mhm.
He's oldest.
Mhm.
And Jack was working in a factory down there for the 7 years that we moved into town. And he said one day he came home and he said, "I quit my job today." I said, "You didn't." I didn't believe him. And he said, "Yeah, I did." And he said, "Are you ready to move?" I said, "Well, give me 5 minutes. I'll be ready." And he said, "Well, where would you want to move?" And I said, "Well, if I were going to move, I'd like to move back out to Union Center."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Well, good, because I called Rob the other day and Rob said he had a place for us."
All right.
I was substitute teaching that day, I guess, or clerking a sale that day. And here he had called, so he had it all planned.
Well, you know, I moved to town. I was 68 years old, and I had a new knee put in, and I was going crazy. And I said to Edna one day, "I'm going to get me a job." And so I put in for 5 jobs, and 5 people called me for them jobs. And then I worked at this one where I wanted to work for 7 years, I guess it was.
7 years.
And now they went broke
Where was that at?
at Princeton, Minnesota.
Mm.
Westlings. You've probably heard of them. Yeah. But I still miss the farm.
Mm-hmm.
I still miss it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I farm for Gary over here every spring.
Mm-hmm. So you're still getting out doing stuff?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just got done.
Well, you know, a lot of people retire at 65. You didn't really do that.
No,
You haven't done it yet.
I can't. Well, look at my brother Rob.
Pretty, yeah,
He's 71.
yeah. Yeah, and there have been a bunch of Smith kids that went through the youth program here, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember one that was a football player.
Yeah,
Was that-
I think
was
that was Ryan.
Ryan.
That's Rob's
Yeah,
son.
that's
Rob's
my
son.
brother's boy.
Yeah.
And Brian, his other son, works over here for Gary Kamak across the road.
Okay, where's Ryan at these days?
He's down in Arizona.
Is he?
Oh,
What's
yeah.
he doing down there now? I
He's
remember
got a
when he was
real-
on the Junior Advisory Council.
Yeah, he's got a really good government job, but I can't tell you exactly what he is doing.
Hmm.
But it's a good job.
Okay.
Yeah, he likes it down there real well.
All right.
Well, see, when we moved out here, why, Rob's wife got cancer and died, and then her sister
Died the same fall.
died the same fall, and I had an uncle that died and the same year, and I don't know who all.
And in 2003, I lost 2 sisters and
Yeah.
a brother. And it worked out just really well. I said the Lord really moved us out here because I would have never been able to be around them while they were sick and in bad health.
Yeah. Did you keep in pretty close touch when you were back in Minnesota with the families out
Oh,
there?
yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. And whenever we vacationed, this is where we came to vacation.
yeah.
We didn't go sightseeing. We could have done that when we lived here.
Yeah.
We just go and visit.
Yeah, that's pretty important.
Yeah, my mother still lived in Sturgis at that time, so I'd always come out as soon as school was out in the spring. I'd drive out, either bring our girls along, or if they were old enough that they didn't come with me, I'd come alone, come and visit her.
Well, we done a lot of traveling, quite a little traveling when we was here. You know, we'd have if we grow so much in sales, well, we get a free trip, you know. We'd have to increase. So I think we went to Florida once and to, where all did we go?
We went to Mexico City.
Mexico City and different places. And I had we had won a trip just before we left to the Bahamas, but we let the guy take it that was going to take over.
Okay.
But if I had to do over again, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Actually, you didn't really win the trip, but you earned it.
Earned it, yeah.
For every $50,000 of increase in that year of net sales, then we would get to have one couple go free.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he'd had about 83,000 that year increase in sales. So then we could have gone, but he was already living in Minnesota in February, and I didn't go down for another month because I needed to have everything straightened out at the bookkeeping end of it here.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Belk. Did you know Bill Belk?
Yeah. I knew Al Belk.
Yeah.
Is that the same
I
guy?
think
We're
he
talking
was
the
a
same
brother.
guy?
I think he was a brother.
Okay.
He said he called up Edna. I was going. He called up Edna and wanted me, and Edna said, "Well, he moved to Minnesota. Well, what's he doing down there?" "Well, we bought a farm." He says, "What did he say?"
He said, "Oh, that's too bad. I was just beginning to like him." Because Jack would call up down at the Central Exchange in St. Paul, and or in Grove Heights, he'd just start in talking. He wouldn't even tell him who was calling, but everybody knew after a while that it was Jack Smith calling.
Yeah. Who was it? Dean Rasmussen, was he your field man out here most of the time when you were here?
Well, we had different ones. We had Rodney Dodge and
Ronnie Hintz.
Ronnie Hintz.
But I think Dean was here.
Yeah, I think he was
longest.
most. We really liked Dean.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, when Harlan Hansen, when we were here, Harlan Hansen would stay with us when he was auditing.
Yeah.
And then he got his own trailer, and he and Elizabeth would come out and park in a space out here, stay here during the audit time.
Yeah, I'm telling you, boy, this auditing, they try to put tricks on him all the time, and he really, when he come out, he really audited. I'll tell you, because.
Is he a Cenex auditor?
Yes.
He was a
Some
farmer's
co-ops
union.
didn't necessarily use
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, he was.
He was. That's all he done.
They didn't call it Cenex then. He just
Farmers Union.
Exchange,
Yeah.
Farmers Union then.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we had an auditor from there, Fred Gilbury. Later
Oh, yes.
on. I don't know whether you knew Fred or not.
I just know the name.
For years, he was the guy who would come in once
He
and
said-
audit the Farmers Union books.
Oh yeah.
He said one manager even set the books afire. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to hide something with
Yeah.
it?
Trying to hide.
Well, okay.
No, we didn't try to hide anything from him. We just.
No, if it wasn't there, it wasn't there. But it was usually all there.
Do you think around here and in other places that today that the patrons and members know the history of their own organization the way they did when they were around when it was being formed?
No. No.
Yeah.
No, it's
No,
a
they
shame
don't.
too. I think they're even getting board members on that don't
know.
really know, and that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Don't know the bylaws or don't know what's going on for sure.
The younger generation need to be educated as to what's going on with the Farmers
Yeah.
Union. And it's still the Farmers Union Oil Company of Union Center is
Yes.
the name, but they're not even using it. When we went up to the annual meeting in Belle Fourche this year, of all 5 of the co-ops here, they didn't even use that name on the brochure or anything.
Oh, really?
They just
Cenex, that's what they use.
they called it Cenex of the Black Hills,
Really?
and that's
Yeah.
not what it should not be that way.
Well, I think they just come up with that.
If they're going to call it that, then they better legally, by the bylaws,
Yeah.
change the bylaw.
Yeah. Yeah, really, legally, it has to, on the annual report, it has to be whatever the bylaws say it is.
That's right.
You know, coming
And that isn't what it said.
else, yeah. And of course, related to that knowledge of the background is co-op loyalty to the co-op. Is that still pretty strong around here? At least the service is still here.
Yes.
They probably still like the service. You
Yeah.
talked about how busy they are.
Yeah.
What has happened though is it's changed so much. I mean, there's not nearly as much here to buy.
Yeah.
You know, that they've really gone down on inventory, and it's gone more to just fuels, and then also the tire changing, going out with the tire truck to do farm tires, and so forth. And the general manager, and I don't know how the board feels about it, but the general manager doesn't think it's necessary to have a tire truck out here. Let them come from Rapid City.
Yeah.
Well, it's because it's not making them much money. But that shouldn't ought to be, because this co-op is still owned by the farmers and ranchers, and it's gone away. I feel it's gone away from the service that they deserve from trading here, whether they're making much money on it or not.
Well, another thing they done here a few years ago, they come out here and put all that junk food in there instead of having hardware in there.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that was good or bad. I didn't think it was good myself.
Did that kind of happen at the same time the store closed over there, or?
Yeah, I suppose it did.
They're doing a little bit of store type stuff in there.
Yeah, they got milk and stuff in there now, you know.
Yeah, it's happening in a lot of communities. In my hometown, North Dakota, that stuff's in a bar because there's such a thing like
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it did happen, I guess, about the same time that the
But I don't know. I don't think that stuff sells that great anyway.
Well, they claim that they're making more money on this junk food, we call it junk food, than they would be on the different things, that the hardware that the farmers and ranchers need. But that's not the reason that the co-op was begun to begin with. It was started with
The intentions
idea
of
in
helping
mind
farmers.
that these people are going to own this co-op. They deserve the service. They deserve to buy the product they need, and not have to go to Sturgis or Rapid City after. Of course, it's gotten so Sturgis doesn't have that much either. It's motorcycle city.
A lot of times they come here and ask what the post was, how much. I'd tell them, I can get them cheaper in Sturgis. I said, well, that's up to you. So they'd go probably to the top of the hill and come back and get them. Because, you know, if Sturgis is 50 miles away, and they get to thinking about that, I guess.
Yeah. There's also a trend that we see in other parts of the state. Maybe I'm not sure whether it's been out. Well, it's certainly up north of here anyhow, and that is something they call regionalization, where people in the local co-op trade their local equity for a bit of equity in the regional, for equity in the regional, and then they pass over the management of the co-op to regional people.
Oh yeah.
And that has, back in the east, then what you sometimes run into is those regionalized areas running up against the independent co-ops and competing with them, and there's a bit of resentment in some people in that. But if you haven't seen that out here, really.
Well, you know, these co-ops that go broke, then the people's just out their money, you know.
Yeah.
That makes it bad.
Yeah.
Or else you can't get it. We've got stocks in that Presho co-op, but you can't get it.
Yeah. I guess we've talked a little bit about the challenges facing cooperatives these days. What do you see anything in addition that we haven't talked about that's a difficulty for them compared to what it used to be?
Well,
we've kind of covered a lot of territory.
Yeah, I think that the big companies people travel so much more nowadays.
Yeah.
When we were here, people didn't have these brand new cars and pickups.
Yeah.
They drove their old ones, and they didn't run to town for every little thing. It seems like now, especially since a lot of women are working in town, clear from out here, that people don't think that much about having to go 50 miles or 80 miles for something like they used to.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's changed so much as far as the way people run nowadays.
Well, I know when we run the co-op, the people didn't have money like they got now. I do know that. But we had a time, I shouldn't even tell them this, but we'd have to pay our bills once a month, and sometimes it run 100,000. I'd write a check, wouldn't sign my name, send it down. And time I got back, I'd have the money gathered up. Time I got it back. And one time, where we was doing our business in the bank, he wouldn't sign my name to it. And so me and him had a little talk about that. Come back and my name wasn't signed to it, so he just signed my name and sent it back.
The banker did.
Yeah, the banker.
Oh, that doesn't happen too much anymore.
No.
No. So you're still doing some work. What do you do with your spare time now that you're back out here? You're living right next to where not quite where you used to work. That's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Well, I farm every spring. Yeah.
And what are you doing?
Well, I do a lot of sewing and
You ought to see the quilts.
Oh, okay.
making quilts, and sometimes people will come with a sewing project for me. They need a dress remade or whatever. I do a lot of sewing, and then I'm involved with our church work, and I teach Sunday school, and
And that's a little church up there?
between here and Inning. And then I also play music, so I'm involved a lot with going to different places and playing for the old folks, and playing for church, and accordion and keyboard, clarinet.
Clarinet too, huh? Well,
Yeah.
you're like a one-woman band, huh?
Farm service days, I go over there and cook for them
Okay.
for 2 days, but this year they only had 1 day. Edna helps to help serve.
There's been a lot of drought around here since you got back.
Oh, man, every year, 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first year we were here, we raised a really good garden.
Yeah.
And Jack is the gardener. He likes to garden, but this year he says he's not going to put in anything.
Well, last year, I was down there at that garden and watered day after day and didn't get much out of it. So we didn't plant a garden last year. We went on a trip. We left the 1st of June and went all through the western, to Washington, Oregon, California. No, not California.
No, we didn't go to California.
And we was going 2 or 3 weeks.
We planned on going to California. I have a brother there yet, and then our daughter lives in California. But by the time we got through the traffic in Oregon and in Washington, we decided we'd had enough of that.
Okay, did you get it to the west of the Cascades there?
Yeah.
Oh, Seattle?
Yeah.
That's about as nasty a traffic as you
Tell me.
Yeah, right.
And then our daughter got sick, and our grandson got hurt, so we went down there, and Edna, I think, was there for how long?
I was there for a month.
For a month, and I was down there for quite a while. I came back because he was having a Hereford reunion, and I didn't want to miss that, so I come back and went to that. Then I had to go back down and get her.
Yeah, Hereford was having their centennial. So.
Yeah. You probably know George Levine.
Oh, yes.
Well, I went to school with George
You
Levine.
did, huh?
I sure did.
You interviewed him here just a few months ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
He was older than I was, but I still went to school with him. He's a good farmers union member, I'll tell you that.
You probably knew Leroy and Virginia Hardy.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah, Leroy was with the Farmers Union Insurance when we were here,
Mm-hmm.
and he used to come out once a week.
Yeah, yeah. And then later on, when I went to work, he was a field man and doing lobbying at Piers. So.
Oh,
Yeah, don't you know, he was down there when I went down there at one time.
that's right.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't seem to me like I have any spare time. Jack always gets after me, says, "You're always working," and I just had my 75th birthday, so he thinks I should be relaxing some more. But I love to sew, so I...
Well, she had a heart attack here 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh yeah.
I thought anybody that she never drank or smoked in her whole life, or caroused around, and I thought she'd be the last one. If anybody should have had a heart attack, it would have been me. Well, you talk about stress.
Yeah.
Them last years I was here, I thought I was having a heart attack. It was just so much stress. Finally went to Rochester, and that's all they could find. It was just stress. They gave me some pills, and I kind of behaved myself after that and got over it, But then my dad died, and her dad died, and my granddad died all in the same month.
Oh.
And then my stress came back again.
Yeah. You all seem like you're pretty relaxed now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We love it here, and it's really nice for Jack. In the morning, he goes over and reads the Rapid City paper because it comes daily here. And if there's a lot of people out there that need something, and he just needs to press something to let them have gas, he can
Answer
do
the
that.
phone. I
He
answered the
answers
phone this morning 2 or 3 times.
just to help him out. He loves to do that. Gives him something to do.
Sure.
Sometimes Rob is already out fixing a tire in the back or doing something like that where he isn't right there, and so Jack just goes ahead and does it.
You talk about stress. When she teaching school down in Minnesota, she was sick that one whole year. Couldn't figure out what was the matter with her. And that's all it was. Made her quit teaching, and that's all it was, just stress. They thought she was having a heart attack and everything else, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I wasn't.
Yeah, I think people, if they can get into something, a position that's a little less stressful, sometimes you can be a lot happier too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we got a daughter that's sick, and she's going to college. She's 40 years old, and I think, talking about sick, I think that a lot of that's stress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just got a couple questions left here. One of them is one I ask everybody: are you optimists or pessimists?
Optimists.
Okay.
Both
I
of us.
haven't met anybody yet. I've had some people say some pessimistic things to me, but then when I ask them that question, they'll never admit to being pessimists.
I'll tell you, anybody that's ever been a rancher or a farmer, they have to be an optimist.
Yeah, they'd have been gone a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to mention that I haven't asked you about? I never know what I'm going to get when I ask that question.
I don't know of anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
No, I don't know of anything really.
All right.
The thing that concerns me, and Jack too, the most about this station is we wonder what's going to happen when Rob and Wayne and Lynn and Viola are all gone.
Mm-hmm.
But this new manager that has come in now is doing really well. He's a good manager, and I think that if the board will cooperate with him, and the manager in Sturgis cooperates with him, the general manager, I think he'll do real fine.
Yeah, he comes from a strong Farmers Union family. I interviewed his dad here.
Oh, did
his
you?
dad used to manage the co-op at Nunda in the eastern part of the state, and I interviewed him just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
Also, his wife is Ben Radcliffe's granddaughter.
Oh, is that right?
If I was younger,
You knew Ben, probably.
I
Was the
didn't-
Farmers Union state president.
Yeah, I didn't really know him, but I know the name.
Yep.
if I was younger, I'd still like to run it.
Yep.
I would. It was my experience and stuff. The downs and ups, I can hack her good now.
But we've got some other really good help over here too.
Yeah.
Both of the other bookkeepers that come, Diane and Joni, are both real good, and they're younger people. So we're just hoping that they'll get some some other guys in here to take Wayne and Rob's place. Rob still wants to work here. He wanted them to get a new manager a long time ago.
Yeah.
But they knew that he was doing a good job, and he was, he's such a hard worker that he was keeping things together.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. We worked awful hard here, and I'm proud of what we done. We brought this thing to start to where it come from. Things was good. This care was paid for just about, and we was making good payments on that, and it was going well when we left. And
well, you don't ever have to be sorry for working hard at something.
and that we had a hand in it.
I guess we feel maybe a little too much attached to the Farmers Union here.
That's
you
right.
see some of the things that you think need to be changed too. We don't like it because there's not a big supply of stuff like we had, but we have to realize that times have changed.
Yep.
And at that time, Jack was the general manager. So that's different too. Now they've got the general manager in Sturgis, and a lot of the bookwork has been shoved up there. A lot of the things that these girls out here were doing is now done in Sturgis, and times have changed.
All these doggone computers, just makes me nervous to see them.
It just seems to me like it has changed from a Farmers Union co-op to a big business.
Yeah.
And that's sad for us.
Yeah, it is.
Because we're so...
Yeah, all they think about is making money.
If it doesn't make money, get rid of it. But that's not what it was started for.
Well, it's just like they're trying to get rid of this tire truck. This tire truck goes out 2 or 3 times. Even today, it's been out twice today. And they want to get rid of it, In the summertime, that thing's going all the time. Maybe it don't make much money, but, it's servicing the farmers, and the farmers is going to come here and buy the stuff. It ain't losing any money, I can guarantee you that.
Okay. We've been visiting with Jack and Edna Smith. Thank you for participating in the Co-op Legacy Project.
You're welcome.
G.
Welcome.
G.
Welcome.
G.
Welcome.